It is 7 p.m. We do have a quorum, and I'll call the February the 12th, 2019 Board of Supervisors meeting to order. We have Pastor Chris Matson, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here to do our invocation. And would everyone please stand and remain standing for the pledge.
Our Father in heaven, we pray for wisdom and ask for guidance and support as we begin this meeting tonight. Help us to engage in meaningful discussion and allow us to grow closer as a group as we work together to overcome our challenges and to work on opportunities in our community. Bless our efforts with clear insight and to make decisions with impartiality. We seek to serve our community with respect to all and to use our resources wisely and well. May we represent all members of our community fairly, no matter of our political views or social standing. As thy trusted servants, we seek these blessings on our efforts here tonight. In the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome everyone. We'll move into our agenda with citizens' time. Ms. Myers?
I just have a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we lost the tobacco tax business. Do you know the approximate cost of that lobbyist, the lobbying effort for us?
Stephen, do you have that number?
Just roughly?
For you, Mrs. Myers, off the top of my head, I believe it was $3,000.
Okay, do those guys get paid regardless of the outcome?
Yes.
Okay, I was just curious. I'm happy about the Apex Center being open and it looks great and so on. What is the minimum remuneration per seat at the events for the county? I know every event has a different seat price and so on, but
It's 10% of what that ticket sale is.
that we get back 10% right off the bat. Okay, all right. And then, of course, we're back to Speedwell. We have, I'm just really concerned again because we're getting into a spring, and of course, we have problems with our feedlot. And I think that DEQ seems to have some sort of a double standard about the environmental degradations. They're so concerned about the Mountain Valley Pipeline, but we're like, they seem to have less interest in ground surface water and pollution, air quality, and so on in our 200-year-old community of humble taxpayers. Could it be because there's no media? Well, what can we do? We need to start again. It's 2019. It's an ongoing situation. We're going to be getting into warm weather. We've got a whole bunch of citizens there that are under the axe. Property values are down. Things cannot be sold there, and so on and so forth. We need ideas, and we need somebody to come up with something. And is there any chance that you guys can get a hold of DEQ and VDAC and everybody in Mount Rogers and ask them for a monthly presentation of some kind of water quality, air quality, and so on, and try and goose them up to get them to do something to help us?
Mr. Baldwin, I know you gave us an update not too long ago that you'd talked to DEQ, and do you have any more updates?
I know, sir. Just, 2-3 weeks ago, Stephen, we had an email inquiry and response, comment back from, from DEQ and VDAC says they're monitoring the situation.
Right, but everybody goes like this, and nobody seems to come up with any paperwork of any pollutants, any tests being done, any water quality samples, have they pulled them, have they tested them, you know? They just keep going like this to everybody else, and we don't get anywhere.
We'll keep, they're state agencies, all we can do is ask them to monitor it. So we'll do what else
Can you ask them
we
to monitor and send reports? And also include
we
something
can
that would say,
we can request whether they send them or not. It's up to them.
well, we're paying for this. So
I mean,
it seems like we should be able to get
and like I said,
requesting.
called Delegate Campbell and Senator Sugarline and Senator Carrico. I mean, they represent us on the state level.
Would it help to have any media attention there? I mean, we could have a manure party, is what we could have.
I know.
It's in the road, You could do it in the right of way, couldn't you, Linda?
Yes, everywhere.
Okay, does anybody else like to speak during citizens' time? Hearing none, I'll close citizens' time and go into our public hearing, and I'll read the notice of public hearing. In compliance with the Code of Virginia and amendments thereto, the Wythe County Board of Supervisors will conduct a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance entitled Wythe County Noise Ordinance. The proposed ordinance will replace Ordinance 2017-2. A public hearing will be held on Tuesday, February the 12th, 2019, at 7:05 p.m. in the boardroom of the Wythe County Office Building, 340 South 6th Street, Wythe, Virginia, at which time the board will hear comments from citizens concerning the proposed ordinance. A copy of the proposed ordinance is on file for public viewing in the Wythe County Administration Office located at 340 South 6th Street, Wythe, Virginia, or online at www.wytheco.org. You will have 5 minutes to speak as an individual, 10 minutes if you're speaking as a group. Ms. Lawson will be calling your name out to come up to the mic. Please give your name, address, and Mr. Bauer, will you summarize what the changes is in the proposed new ordinance?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In June of 2017, the Board of Supervisors adopted a noise ordinance for Wythe County. Last year, the board recommended looking at it and possibly making some revisions to that ordinance. What you're holding the public hearing on tonight are the proposed changes to that ordinance. Copies of the ordinance are in the back on the table there for anyone that may not have a copy of it. Basically, the changes that are proposed and with the public hearing on tonight, on the section number 4 of the proposed ordinance, the current ordinance said to create plainly audible noise between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. in connection with lawn care, leaf removal, gardening, tree maintenance or removal, other landscaping, lawn or timbering activities. What was added was the and unnecessary discharging of firearms. This was intended at someone shooting off firearms at night, target shooting at 2 o'clock in the morning, or issues like that, recklessly discharging of firearms. I understand there's been quite a few questions, and I'll let the board members comment on it, but this was not in any way intended to apply towards coyote hunting, coon hunting, nighttime hunting, any of those incidents like that. The next change to the ordinance is on the back of the copy there, page 2. The current ordinance does not list any exemptions. The proposed ordinance includes the 3 exemptions. 1, no provision of this chapter shall apply to the emission of sounds for the purpose of alerting persons to the existence of an emergency or of the emission of sound in the performance of emergency work. It should be or, not of, the emissions of sound. That is a typo right there in that one. The second one is no provisions of this chapter shall apply to the emissions of sounds associated with agricultural activities. And 3, no provision of this chapter shall apply to emissions of sounds associated with and or in conjunction with industrial operations. Item C has been added as well to stop from having nuisance calls where individuals were calling about the neighbors, and basically anyone aggrieved by the conduct in 2A above, which is the section of the noise, may report the violation to the Wythe County Sheriff's Office or Consolidated Dispatch Center, and the person aggrieved in reporting such violation shall provide his or her name and contact information. So those are the changes from the current ordinance that are proposed for this ordinance 2019.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. Any board member like to make any comment before we get started in the public comment period?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify some of the emails I've got, going back to what Mr. Barrett said about the coyote hunting, I did have several questions, or several people questioned, when people coyote hunt, of course, they use an amplified call system that mimics animal noises to call the coyotes in. I personally believe that that would be exempt as it's part of illegal hunting. But I told them I'd get clarification to see what everybody else thinks. I mean, they're not calling coyotes in playing Elvis, and I think that's what the amplified, part of it was more toward music and musical instruments. So my personal opinion is that if they're legally coyote hunting, and most coyote hunters and even coon hunters I know are very respectful because they know they're out at 1 o'clock in the morning.
And I believe it would be exempt also, but is our verbiage maybe too vague? Do we need to talk to Scott Farthing again over that? Do we need to add something about hunting in there, or do you all think that that covers it?
I don't think you're ever gonna get all the language to suit everybody. If you weren't being disrespectful of coon hunters, they were just as nice as coyote hunters, but bear hunters would be in there if they got dogs, so you can't cover everything. And I think sometimes the more we try to drill down on the letter of the law, as we were discussing, you impede the spirit of the law.
Well, ultimately, it's going to boil down to the sheriff's enforcement of it, and I've spoken to the sheriff, and he's kind of the same mindset. If somebody's legally hunting, then he's not going to have deputies going out there to harass people that are engaged in otherwise legal activity.
Any other comments? Hearing none, we'll start the public comment period. Ms. Lawson will call your name, and like I said, please come up, give your name and address, and you have 10 minutes as an individual, 5 minutes as an individual, 10 minutes as a group. Ms. Lawson?
Okay, we had 6 sign up this evening. First on the list, we have Edward Lilly.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening,
Good evening.
and bear with me, I'm not too familiar with the proceedings. We have lived in this county all of our lives, and Rita's lived on this particular piece of property since 1983 with quiet possession and peaceful existence until the presence of a trucking company moved in about a couple of years ago, the fleet of trucks. My question is, according to Section A, Item 4, to create plainly audible noise between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. in connection with lawn care, gardening, tree maintenance removal, or other landscaping, lawn or timbering activities and necessary discharging of firearms. They are got a fleet of trucks that come and go all night long with the state mandated backup beepers, which are clearly disruptive at all hours of the night, very disruptive to her. My question is, and I don't know if you will respond or not, is will the provisions of this apply to this disruptive sound? And are they mandated to have those backup beepers and function at all times? I don't know the answer to that question. The exemptions say no provisions of this chapter shall apply to the emission of sounds associated with and or in conjunction with industrial operations. Now, I don't know if a trucking company is an industrial operation by the definition of that or not. And I know they have trucks that come in and out all hours of the night. It's a business. But is there no remedy for those of us who've lived there, for these past 30-some years that are disrupted in the middle of the night from the trucks backing up? That's my question. So.
Well, I'm gonna respond. I don't think it applies to that industry, the way the ordinance is written. And as far as backup, I know it's a safety thing, and I know where you live at or what company you're talking about. But the company may mandate it, or not. I don't know where OSHA mandates it or not, do they?
I'm pretty sure they do.
They mandate the backup beepers.
Mr. Lilly, where do you live?
I live at 312 Major Graham's Road, right near exit 84 on the far end of Major Graham. So there's, it's Bob Eaton's son's got the truck garage there, and they're good neighbors. We don't have a problem with them at all. It's the back part of the lot has been leased out to
Love's
Truck Stop, and they come and go all night, so that's the issue. Rita was most adamant that this be brought forward, and I'm of the opinion that if you live in a county with no zoning, and, they're following the law by having the beepers on the trucks, I couldn't see what is a whole lot that could be done, but I don't know. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I know it's annoying, but I guess, but Love's, that's the majority of the time that they haul most of their diesel and
I
gas
realize
at
that.
night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Linda Meyer.
Speedwell. I was recently playing around on the computer, and I found the Virginia Supreme Court website, and on there is a recent litigation with an individual and against Virginia Beach. And it basically said the police cannot continue with an ordinance like this without having, is it a decimeter, whatever it is, to record. So that's coming from the Virginia Supreme Court recently. So without documentation, does this leave us are we in for litigation? Are people in for litigation? Is the county? Because we aren't going to be using that kind of
Well,
stuff?
I mean, we know about that, the ordinance that Virginia Beach does have. And we tried to structure with our attorney, ordinance that was a little bit better than what their ordinance is.
But it still doesn't have the whatever technology and so on and so forth. Campbell County and Lynchburg, they're currently working on an ordinance also. Have you been in contact with them, or could you be in contact with them and see if they've come up with something also? I'm just concerned about litigation in the future, and I'm concerned about that our police would be placed in awkward positions. I mean, we all know these guys, we live with these guys, and we want to make their life not hard,
Yeah.
or harder. And it
So-
just seems to leave things up for like neighbors weaponizing neighbors if you don't have maybe this electronic stuff that would prevent that.
We're both physical conservatives, and to have a decibel meter, we discussed this at length. We had Dr. Cook here in the beginning. We went through this, and it would really be cost prohibitive for every deputy to have to carry a meter in his truck. Where would the money come from? So,
I don't know.
if we had this scientific measurement in there, it would still be a distance thing. You would have to have some benchmarks of what is a level that's acceptable at 50 feet or 100
Sure.
feet or 1,000 feet. So we only get deeper in it, but we would have scientific. Now, on the other hand, somebody can bring a lawsuit, and at that time, it'd be up to us or the county sheriff's department to defend that suit. I don't think we're leaving ourselves open to anything but the possibility, and they're always out there.
Okay,
Thank you.
just so, as long as you're aware. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Myers.
Next, we have Stacy Dixon.
How you doing?
Good evening.
I live on Whippoorwill Road in Wytheville, outside the town limits. By no means am I saying that we don't need a noise ordinance. We do, but I've pondered over this, talked with several people. I don't think there is a viable noise ordinance that can be prosecuted. There's so many things. I'm not an attorney, but I've been in court for 25 years, but there's so many things, if I was to represent somebody who was charged with this, that I could bring up in court to get it tossed out immediately. So from the enforcement perspective of this, it's very, very hard to prove some of this stuff that's on here. Words like unnecessary, even the feet. I could ask every one of you to point out 50 feet from me, and there'll be 7 different answers. What's unnecessary, to you is different than what's unnecessary to you. So I'm looking at it from both perspectives. Of course, I am an avid outdoorsman, do everything that there is to do in the outdoors, and I do a lot of it at night. But doing some of this and causing noise that goes along with it. So it's not only the coyote hunting. Some people are spending $3,000 or $4,000 for a thermal imager scope that can only be shot at night to be lined in. Well, they're not hunting at the time, but they have to shoot it at night to line it in. If I get a call and go to that right there, what am I supposed to say to them? You need to stop? Because I've answered these calls on the other ordinance, and it's hard to sit there and explain what's legal and what's not legal. The defining words in here, unnecessary, 50, I just don't see how you can enforce those kind of laws. The laws in the state of Virginia are very specific on what you can and can't do. I don't think that opinionated laws can be prosecuted in the court. And then I think that's going to come back and hurt us in the long run. And it makes it hard on us, like Ms. Meyer said, very hard on us. And just like he said, well, hunting is exempt, but it don't say that in here. Nowhere in this does it say if you're legally hunting, you're exempt. It just says unnecessary discharge. So if hunting is going to be exempt, it needs to be listed in here as legal hunting is exempt. Safe operation of a firearm, if you're at a shooting range or you're back on your 40-acre farm shooting into a bank, if you're doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's safe, legal operation of a firearm. But is it against this ordinance? That's up to someone's opinion. So I'd just like y'all to look further into that before you put anything like this into effect that we have to go out and try to
Well,
enforce.
there are ordinance in effect. I mean, this is trying to clarify some points in the previous ordinance.
Yes. And the other ordinance, I may be wrong, but I don't think anybody's been convicted on it in court yet. And I may be wrong. If they have, I'm not aware of it. I've not seen or heard or talked to anybody who has charged it and had any successful prosecution on it.
I don't even know how many complaints we've had. And
I had several complaints that I answered in the beginning. A lot of shooting complaints. Some people complaining about exhaust and mufflers, but that's covered under something else, and that's easy to explain. The shooting stuff and the car radios, I answered a couple of those. The time thing helped on that because people were calling about people playing the radio at 2 o'clock in the evening. Can't help you, but before, that was one of, several of the calls we got. But as far as enforcing this law, it's really hard. And it's going to be really hard to enforce. And to prosecute, it's going to be even harder.
We did have the Commonwealth Attorney go over this too, didn't we?
Let's go a little bit of the history of this. Mr. Baird, I believe that we didn't come up with this need for an ordinance. We didn't come up, any of us on this board didn't say, gosh, we need to go out and create a new ordinance to create a problem. We did this ordinance at a request of the Sheriff's Department because of a couple of incidents because y'all's hands were tied.
I agree.
And they're going to continue to be, states. There's no way there's a perfect ordinance for this. But you mentioned
I agree
shooting.
totally.
You know where I live. I hear anything that's different because I live in the woods. But I think several years ago when you were working nights, I had guys running up down the road discharging firearms. We don't have an ordinance about shooting from the road because we've never passed one in any county in Southwest Virginia. People can legally hunt from the road. We don't have a law for that. So we had people run up, that's true, I know what I'm talking about. You can't arrest them, a game warden can't arrest them. They can ride up and down the road with a gun sticking out the window. Unless they shoot at an animal, they haven't broke the law. They run up and down that road years ago shooting. We needed something that you could make an arrest or take the gun away from them.
Now, for me, that's reckless operation of a firearm,
Right,
reckless
which we
handling.
do have a law for.
And we have a law for that.
But if he just stops and starts shooting up in the air at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna call dispatch. And y'all need a tool to work with.
And I have charged and successfully prosecuted people for reckless handling of a firearm because they were having a domestic and they run outside with a gun, fired it up in the air. Because they don't know where that bullet's going. If you don't know where the bullet's going, it's reckless handling of a firearm. I have prosecuted that or been involved in prosecuting of that. That's just, one of my concerns is seeing this go to court. And my last thing is, let's not forget this is rural Wythe County. We're not talking about the town of Wytheville, we're not talking about the town of Rural Retreat. They have their own stuff. We're talking about rural Wythe County, people who live and have farms and have big enough areas to do stuff on their own property that ordinarily shouldn't bother anybody, but if one person hears it, then we got this to deal with. But let's not forget, this is a rural area we're talking about here. We're not talking about Virginia Beach or Lynchburg or some of the bigger cities. We are talking about rural Wythe County and not in the town even. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy. Okay, next we have, I believe it says James Smith.
Good evening, I'm James Smith. I live on Byers Lane, down in the Max Meadows area. I'm just kind of going to build on what Stacy was talking about. I know, Ms. Lawson, you had mentioned adding more language in there about hunting, and I know, Mr. Hale, you seem to be totally against that. What would it hurt to put just the verbiage in there, excludes hunting? You've got an amendment you're going to do about agriculture, about machinery on the back, as Mr. Byer talked about.
Because of the ones of us that live in the country, because we live where we want to unless we inherited a place. We live in the country because we choose to and we love it.
Exactly.
But if we exempt all hunting, then how close can a hunter come to your house and you're living on the road, maybe 200 or 300 yards off the road? They don't bother me, but bear hunters quite often near my house tree a bear. That's a real big commotion. It's very exciting, but it may not be to everybody. And they tree a bear in front of my house, 100 yards from my house. They're not on my property. But if they're staying there 2 hours trying to recover their dogs, and most bear hunters now don't shoot bears, but they have a good time when they tree a bear. So just a total exemption for hunting will put us in another avenue that somebody else is going to be opposed to. So the state laws under game regulations pretty much cover everything except this issue of noise. I don't think there's a fix for it. I don't think there's one answer for everything.
Yeah, and I think a couple things. I think if we had that language in, a lot of questions would have went away from Mr. Vaughn. He wouldn't have got a lot of emails, which I'm sure everybody did. But the other piece is to answer your question, if the bear hunters had legal right to be on somebody else's land and they're not on your land, I don't see where that's an issue. I mean, if somebody had rights to hunt my land and my neighbor had a problem with it, they had a legal right to be on my property to hunt.
That's right, but the noise ordinance, where would it be?
You have a right to hunt, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah,
tell you.
but they don't have the right to go there and have a music festival in the middle of
So
the
you didn't
night.
say they was playing music, you said they was treeing a bear.
Well, but I'm saying the point is the land don't enter into this. I'm a property rights person also.
Right.
But just because it's across the fence and it's still offensive noise, if we do a blanket exemption for hunting, I think we're opening a different barrel of worms here.
All right, so let me phrase it this way. The unnecessary discharge of a firearm, exempt the hunting from that.
No problem.
I think that would take away a lot of the problems.
Right.
If not, the question I have about unnecessary discharge of firearm, who dictates what's unnecessary?
All right.
Who determines that?
Well,
Is it
depends on
me?
how many
Is it
times you
you?
miss,
Is it
I
Mr.
guess.
Reeves?
I understand.
I think you need to look at it.
Well, we've been looking at it for a long time, and it keeps taking up a lot of time. We pay the attorney to work on it.
Yeah, so, and that brings up another point for me. I personally think there's other things in the county that needs y'all's attention versus worrying about a gun noise.
Amen, brother.
You know what I mean? There's lots of things that's going on. I don't know that there's been a lot of issues with gun noise after 11 o'clock. I would have to defer to Stacy or Mr. Vaught. They work for the sheriff's department. I wouldn't know that, but where I live, I'm like you, Mr. Hale. I live in the mountain down at Fort Chisholm area. I have no problems. I hunt. Like Mr. Dixon here, I'm an avid hunter. And I really was struggling about this. It was nice to hear Mr. Byron when he said it, this didn't include hunting. But I think to Ms. Lawson's point, if there was language in here, it would take away a lot of the issues.
Well, and Mr. Smith, I'll answer your question. You asked, kind of who's it up? Who determines whether it's unnecessary? And that's kind of why I talked to the sheriff. Ultimately, it comes down to whoever the deputy is. And they work for the sheriff, and, he's, like I said earlier, he's made it pretty plain. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're out there partying, and you got a brick of .22 ammo, and you're emptying the magazine. That's unnecessary.
Yeah, so I mean.
And it's a common sense, and to go back to what Mr. Hale said, if we put every exemption in there, this thing will be 700 pages long. I wanted to make sure the hunting part was good. I think everybody can agree that, and you don't need to be out goofing off with a firearm unless you're hunting in the middle of the night. What Stacy talked about, lining in, your night vision or your, whatever scope, I don't think that's unnecessary. But,
But what if your neighbor did, and they called the law, and it's not spelled out in the law, the ordinance?
but it's not.
You're gonna have to have the headache of that.
Yeah, and that's one reason we put in the thing that people had to give their name and address. I had somebody in my district that was getting harassed under the old ordinance. He had no civil remedy. Who's he gonna sue? The deputy for going out there and doing their job? No, that's not gonna work. This way, if you have somebody that keeps calling on you, you do have a civil remedy now.
Right.
But
So the last thing I got, you said 700 pages. I think we can get it in like the agriculture. You don't need 700 pages. Just
well, the hunting,
one.
yeah, but I have no problem with the hunting.
Don't need to make it difficult.
Well, and I don't either. I don't have no problem with the hunting, and as far as lighting in scopes, I mean, you gotta be reasonable. I mean, you got from 9 o'clock or 9:30 in the summertime up until 11 o'clock if you're lining in a scope. I mean, to me, after that, or 12 o'clock, or 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, to me, it's unnecessary. Now, hunting's a different story. I used to hunt, haven't hunted in years, but I farm, I've got coyotes, and, they need to be out there at night shooting, and I don't have no problem with hunting, and if it takes putting that in the ordinance, I'm for it.
Yeah, I think it would be good to add that in.
Mr. Chairman, if we add that, do we have to have another public hearing?
We'll have to talk to Mr. Farthing, but I think it depends on.
I think it's
probably
just a
will.
clarification.
Yeah.
We're not adding anything, we're clarifying what we meant to start with.
Right.
That's,
I mean,
We'll
that's
just
what I
have
would
to check
think.
with him
Yeah,
and see if he thinks it's legal. We can just add that to that paragraph.
Thank y'all for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Doug Wilson.
Doug Wilson, 694 Gap Ridge Road, Royal Retreat. And as I read and hear, I don't have a leg to stand on, but you know why I'm here. As I look on, I try to combine number 1 and number 4. My complaint is the racetrack on Saturday night, running past 11:30. It's a business, I have no problem with that, but I do have a problem with someone running at 12 o'clock at night and then get our 1 o'clock, we've had 1 and 2 o'clock on Sunday morning, or getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to run, to prove that their car could run better than it did the night before. Would love to combine the time limit. Then I looked and tried to decide how the racetrack would fit. It's not a sporting event. I guess it could be entertainment or public function. But my whole thing is the time limit. And Mr. Vaught just brought up it would have to be another public hearing if you change something. So I guess there was another leg I lost.
Let me ask you a question just to clarify what you're saying. You're saying that people, after the racing is over with.
Well, they'll run till 1 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock
I mean,
and 1, but there'll be people
the only-
get on
the
there and
only-
run by themselves.
When they run after 12, it's from a rain delay or something like that, is
Not necessarily.
I know one night they had a fog rolled in, and I was on my front porch, and you know where I live.
I'd love to be able to hear a gunshot on a Saturday night.
And it was
After 11
after
o'clock.
2 a.m., and I could hear them running on Mountain View Avenue.
Oh,
So if I could hear them, I know you could.
I'm a
hear
mile and a half away, and I'd love to be able to hear a gunshot on a Saturday night after 11 o'clock.
You know,
but, you know,
I think that may be something that we need to,
I think Elk Creek had to address it, they had to start earlier because they were running so late. But to me, there's just no excuse to be running cars.
I mean, you know, I can
12
say,
o'clock, 1
if
o'clock.
you know, people buy their tickets and they're there, and they have a rain delay or something, and once in a while it goes past midnight, but if it's happening,
It's
and
pretty
people just
consistent.
getting out there
Oh.
and running just to be running in the morning, to me, that's unreasonable.
Yep, I agree.
I don't think if the race is over, I don't think they're exempt. If the racing is, the racetrack is considered a sporting event.
Yeah.
Once the competition ends, I don't think it's a sporting event anymore.
That was one of my questions on the old ordinance, if they're running, I know if it's advertised for the day, Saturday. If they're running at 1 o'clock Sunday morning, does that change that?
I think that may be a conversation we need to have with the owner, and if it keeps on,
Oh,
we may
it's-
have to come back and revisit this.
It's pretty consistent.
Oh, yeah.
They could start earlier would be my whole point. But like I say, that's between the owner. Thank you.
Thanks,
I wish
Doug.
I had a whistle.
I wish I could hear it on a Saturday.
And last on the list, we have Daniel Parks.
It sounds like all the coyote hunting stuff has been took care of, and that was mainly what I was worried about. I have way more than $4,000 invested in this stuff, so sounds like y'all are on the right track. I don't see why people would shoot more than 5 or 6 times at one stand anyway, so take that in consideration.
Let me ask you a question real quick, and it's been several years since I went coyote hunting, but realistically, you only get one shot at a coyote, correct?
I've took 4 or 5 shots at a pack.
At a pack, but.
I
if
shot
you
the
just
first
gotta-
one, and he was squealing, and the rest of them wanted to know what he was squealing about.
So you obliged and told them what he was squealing about,
I
right?
tried my very best, yes.
But I mean, I just want to clarify, people are not out there emptying a magazine at one coyote. If it's a single coyote, in my experience, you got
He's
one
either
chance
down, or
that-
you gotta get him next
Yeah.
time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. That's all we had signed up. unless-
That's everyone that signed up for the public hearing, but I know some people come in late. If you have a chance right now, if you want to come up and speak your piece, Mr. Walters.
Well, thank you, Kim. Good to see you, Mr. Wilson. Of course, I got in here late, which is nothing unusual. But the thing of it is, all right, coyote hunting is a delicate matter. There's a lot of times as a matter of fact, unfortunately, I went to the extreme and I went to a silencer. Because I got tired of turning around there and firing a shot, and then everybody in the country heard me fire a shot. You follow me? Next thing I know, I started seeing lights going around every damn where. Okay. Coyotes are a different adversary is the way I look at it. Yeah, there's been times that I've shot 10 times. Shoot that first one, you wound him. You let that sucker squall, you do whatever you let him make all the hell he wants to make. That's when the rest of them start coming in. That's when you start cleaning house on coyotes. Now, furthermore, of course, we're long past this because a lot of us don't have sheep. Except for Mr. Wilson back there. Years ago, we used to deal with a problem with wild dogs. I got a very good education by my dad on how fast a dad blame Sweet 16 can work. I've seen that man shoot and fire as many as 10 rounds faster than I could even think. Guess what? That eliminated sheep problems. If we go into the situation of noise ordinance, unfortunately some of my neighbors are not here. Gene, you'll be a good example of this. I've got a heck of a toy now. And most of the time my work that I do is after dark. And a lot of times I go on until 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning with a rock hammer. And I will bust rock. So what is to say that my neighbors, which are there, they'll be 300 or 400, maybe 500 yards away from me, hear me out there picking with a rock hammer. And let me tell you, that thing makes a terrible racket. But there's one thing about it. I'm eliminating rock on my farm. And I'm not having to worry about turning around and hitting them with a disc mower and causing me more $1,000 worth of damage, or a bush hog. And we really need to look into this a little bit more serious, other than the fact, I'm not worried about somebody shooting at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the night. Matter of fact, that's a warning sign to me that there's something around me. My wife, I live down in the hollow. If there's a gunshot fired at 12 o'clock at night, I'm up out of the bed going to see what's going on. If it is something that is not unnecessarily, trust me, it's going to be addressed real fast. I don't worry about calling the sheriff's department because most of the time everything I take care of on my own. If I need help, I go back to a dear friend of mine, which is Doug King, and I ask him for his advice and information. And I don't know where all this is going to as far as ordinance and everything like that. But on the other hand, coon hunters, coyote hunters, and all that, I don't think yet you got a thing in this world to worry about. In all due honesty, I really don't. Now, if it's somebody out here that is drunk or whatever, they're going to make a mistake regardless. If they're out here discharging a fully automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon, firing 10 or 12 shots, guess what? It's going to get everybody's attention. There's going to be officials brought in. Stacy, that's where you're going to come in. It's going to be addressed with real fast. Now, whether I made any sense out of this to all of y'all tonight, I don't know. But as far as me and where we live and everything, you're invited to my farm. good coyote hunter. I have no problem with it. And if you look over the aspect of probably about 98% of the people in Wythe County, there really is no aspect. 2%. I've done the math. I study statistics quite a bit. 2%. Hell, that could be somebody moved here from New York or Pennsylvania or whatever, come here to retire and fussing because we're making a little bit of racket. That's all I've got to say, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, anyone else would like to speak concerning the public hearing? Come on up.
My name is Gary Wayne Allison. I live at 219 Austinville Road. I know Mr. Parks. I think y'all pretty well covered the coyote hunting aspect, but I wanted to come up here to answer any questions y'all got about coyote hunting in case you don't have knowledge about it. Because it's extremely important to me, because I'm a disabled veteran, that's all I got. And I gotta have it to get out at night and do my thing. And like I say, also I'm with Mr. Parks. I have several $1,000s worth of equipment. And I like to exercise in my sport avidly, as much as I possibly can. But if anybody's got any questions about what goes on, if you don't have the knowledge, I'd like to take the opportunity to try to answer for you.
Well, thank you for your service, first of all. But, yeah, well, my son coyote hunts at night sometimes up on the farm and stuff, and I think I have a pretty good idea, and I don't think anybody on this board even meant to, you know, for legal hunting,
Well, like I say,
to have any.
I think y'all have got a good idea and support it, but like I say, just in case, because of the knowledge that, you know, what you don't know, you need to ask questions, and that knowledge can empower you to benefit other people in the community. And I agree with this gentleman back here, 2% is all it's gonna be complaining. And I also agree, if you're drunk and you're emptying a 50-round brick into a stump, they need to haul you to jail. Ain't no sense in it, because that makes the rest of us out here trying to do and be respectful to landowners and property owners and farmers. That just makes us look worse. And like I say, and yeah, I do, Mr. Hale, I miss a lot. But I got a magazine, fed weapon, and I'll shoot 5, 6, 8 times. I ain't gonna lie to you. When you get them a squealing and coming in, 4 or 5 come in, you get excited, get that blood pumping, you know, it's gotta happen.
Well, I endorse your efforts.
But like I say, I just want to come up and see if there's any questions y'all have pertaining that you needed knowledge to help make your decision in your process.
And as far as I know, there's nobody on this board ever got a complaint about somebody hunting.
Well, like I say, I'm standing here in support of coyote hunting and just trying to protect what I enjoy doing.
Okay.
And I appreciate y'all's time and allowing me to come before you and listen to what I had to say.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
What did you say your name was?
My name's Gary Wayne Allison, young lady.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison. Anybody else like to come up and speak? This is your last chance. Come on up. Morning, Mr. Sheriff. Morning. Good night, Mr. Sheriff. Good evening.
Good evening. My name's David Sherritts. I live 3633 Wesley Highway. Everything, all these points have been good. I would ask you all, it doesn't look like it would be hard to put an exemption for hunting in here. I mean, it's not going to take a lot of paperwork. You've already got a few exemptions. And I know the intent of this board, and I know the intent of the Sheriff's Department now is that it doesn't infringe on hunting, but this board's going to change, and the Sheriff's Department will change, and we'll still have this ordinance to live with. So, you know, when you all have moved on to something else, the ordinance is still here. And if we happen to get a board that is not pro-hunting, or a sheriff that's not pro-hunting, then we've still got to deal with this. So I would ask you to go ahead and put an exemption in.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Okay, last chance. This is the last time we'll say, does anybody else like to come up and speak?
Sit down, Doug.
Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. We will take all your comments into consideration. We won't be making no decision tonight on changing the ordinance. I think there's still some work we need to be done on it, and if we have to change it enough, we'll have another public hearing. So we'll make sure it's out and everybody knows what's in it before we do. Okay, thank y'all for coming out, and we'll move on into our agenda. Next item on our agenda is payment of invoices. I entertain a motion to approve the invoices.
Chairman? Go ahead. I might get one.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Before we do this, let's take a 5-minute recess.
I think that.
We have a motion, a second, pay the invoices. Any invoice, any board member would like to pull out a question? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Ball?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting, January 22nd, 2019. Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Have a second. Have a motion and a second. Any corrections or changes need to be made to the minutes? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horning?
Aye.
all right.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item's old business. Mr. Burge, anything under old business we need to take care of?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any old business for you this evening.
Okay, new business, Fire and Rescue Committee.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Fire and Rescue Committee met on February the 7th. Number one, to adopt the designated emergency response agency plan, which designates the 3 county EMS agencies are our 911 dispatched agencies. All other agencies within the county will be designated transport companies.
Okay, we'll take one of these at a time. Come from committee, it doesn't need any second. Any questions? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horning?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next item.
Item 2, to adopt the proposed reimbursement policy for all with county fire and rescue agencies.
Okay, again, come from committee, it doesn't need a second. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I will just comment. I appreciate Mr. Crawford being here tonight, and I appreciate Mr. Crawford's work. He has done a good job of just creating documentation and policies that everyone can have. Basically, what's here is the process been followed but not been documented real well. So this is just establishing this as the policy and procedures.
All fire departments have had a chance to look at this.
We've had it at the Fire and Rescue Committee meetings, and yes, there weren't any issues with it. Thank you.
Still not working?
Yeah, you're working.
Okay. I hope each board member got a chance to read the
Policy.
it's a pretty good policy. With no other questions, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Ball?
Aye.
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 Aye. The chair votes aye.
Item 3, to approve changes in the fire department response zones as agreed to by the fire chiefs.
Okay, again, coming from committee, doesn't need a second. Any questions? Comments? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horning? Aye.
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 Aye. I'm sorry. I've been sick and I've taken cough, sir. I apologize.
Maybe you ought to cut it off for a minute.
Okay, is that all from the Fire and Rescue?
It is.
Okay,
Building and Grounds Committee.
Building and Grounds Committee met on February the 5th. Recommendation, Building and Grounds Committee met, recommends purchase of a 40-yard optical compactor container for Rural Creek Convenience Center at a cost of $36,584.21. This will leave approximately $3,415 to complete the associated concrete work.
Okay, again, come from committee, it doesn't need a second. Any questions or comments? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Ball?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Economic Development Committee.
Economic Development Committee met on February 5th, 2019, and recommends proceeding with Hurt and Profit for the final design and development of the Apex site at a cost of $45,961.80. The proposal allows for potentially lower traffic engineering fees by the county, providing the previous VDOT studies from the Smart Scale application.
Second, any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just comment, this is the property adjoining the property that's been leased to the Apex Center. I think everyone is aware of that, but just for the public, the county still has 56 acres there, so this is not directly Apex developed property, but it's the adjoining property, and the plans create approximately 5 lots, which there has been interest from some local businesses and outside businesses for possible development on that area.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, Stephen, this is not actually building that road up in there. This is just getting the plan together
Yes.
to sell those lots.
Correct. This is a plan to design the road and the lots that'll go in. Yes.
I'm having a bad night, Mike.
You don't mind?
It's still,
Yeah, you're on.
there it goes. Okay. Any more questions? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horning?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
The chair votes aye. Anything else from the Economic Development Committee?
That's all.
Water Committee?
All right, the Water Committee met February the 6th to make the following recommendations. First is to proceed with the Max Meadows Bridge water line replacement project at a negotiated cost of $130,250.
Okay, again, come from committee, it doesn't need a second. Any questions?
What was that original bid price?
144,000 and something, Mr. Hale. The committee met, or the staff met a couple times with the contractor, reviewed it. They went out on site and reviewed everything to try to make any changes that they could in the process.
And those were just detailed changes and method changes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horning?
Aye.
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 The chair votes aye. Next item?
Number 2 is to accept the proposal from Mattern and Craig for the Austinville wastewater collection and treatment system evaluation at a cost of $22,000.
Again, come from committee, it doesn't need a second. Mr. Perry, you want to summarize this?
Yeah, basically, the Austinville wastewater treatment plant over there, the lines need some checking out, going through. There's places where we know we've got infiltration into the lines that need to be looked at. The plant itself is going to need some work. Probably 10 or 15 years ago, we replaced the trickling arm and did some work on it. This is just to have the evaluation and study to come up with what need to be addressed there with that system. Most of you are aware this was the old mine system that the county inherited, I want to say back maybe in the early 80s, somewhere in there. So this is just to start that evaluation so we can start making plans for the improvements that are needed.
Okay. Does that raise any question from any board member?
Yeah, as part of this study, evaluate its ability to be expanded or renovated, keep a permitted place.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Here none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Vaught?
Aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Apex Construction Committee.
I don't have any notes, but I'd like for Mr. Bond to give us an update, Mr. Bear to give us an update.
We have two
two
recommendations from the committee.
recommendations.
The first was the approval of the RGM invoice for the removal of the rock in the arena at a cost of $2,800.
Okay, income from committee, it doesn't need a second. Any questions?
Can you explain exactly what that is?
I'd like to cover that, Mr.
Yes,
We
please.
had in our contract document says you should always have a rock clause and had a bid price for removing rock. We had paid the excavation contractor to shoot that rock. They didn't get it all, so they had to bring in a rock breaker, and they were paid according to that bid price to remove additional rock.
Any more questions?
That was, I assume that was discovered when they were getting the,
When they laid back the
Arena,
wall
yeah.
to
Yes.
build the wall, that's when they found it. Okay, do a roll call vote, Mr. Horny. The chair votes aye. Next item,
To approve RGM's proposal for parking blocks in the handicap parking lot at a cost not to exceed $4,300.
okay, again, come from committee, it doesn't need a second. This is to protect our poles and our handicap signs. And there's nothing there to keep people right now from running into them or just knocking them over. And they did cost a lot of money to put them up.
How many of these are there?
36.
36 of them.
Mr. Chairman,
I think it'd be cheaper to go down here and just buy them great big 2 foot by 2 foot blocks at the concrete place.
That's what they're talking about, the regular.
No, I'm talking about 6 foot long and 2 foot high by 2 foot high, thick.
They wouldn't be very seemly.
Mr. Chairman, my only question would be, why was this left out of the original bid for the parking lot? I mean, was it oversight?
That I can't answer, I
I
guess.
mean, we've got a county engineer and a construction manager, yet this
In the-
stuff keeps
in the-
happening.
Yeah, in the design documents from the Lane Group, it did not include these in that documentation.
Right, normally, if you see them, you'll see them just a drawing on the detail sheet, it's a parking block, and then it's a line item in the spec somewhere, and that wasn't included in the project.
And one of the things that we overlooked when we went over the plans. Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Horny,
Right.
No.
the chair votes aye. Okay, next item is surplus sheriff vehicles. You have a list there in front of you. And
Mr. Chairman, typically in the past, you have received this request along with the Gov Deals type bids on these items. As you're aware, the sheriff has entered into a lease agreement with Enterprise for vehicles, and they will be disposing of these vehicles through Enterprise. And these are currently at the Buildings and Grounds shop, ready to be picked up by Enterprise once they are declared surplus, and then will be sold at that point in time in negotiations with the sheriff.
Okay. And does that raise any questions?
This isn't something we need to read the disclosure over.
I think we read it when we read the disclosure when we voted on the Enterprise agreement. I wouldn't think we.
Yeah, I would agree. That's just disposing of the vehicles, so disposing of fixed assets.
No.
So for clarification,
Yes.
does the Enterprise report back to the sheriff and to the board what those
Yes,
vehicles are sold for?
absolutely. And that was one of my questions, Mr. Hale. I spoke with the representative we'd been dealing with and asked him to give me some names of some other localities. I spoke to those localities about the process, how that worked, how the negotiations worked and all that, and they provide that information back. And then those funds can go against the lease payments or however we want to apply them in the process.
Any other questions?
I heard what he said, but I don't think I got an answer. Do the vehicles go to them as a sales agent? And if they come back and say, we only got $200 each for the car, can you say no sales?
Yes, that was my direct question, and the gentleman said they come back to us and say, this is the offer we have received, are you okay with us selling this vehicle? And the answer is yes or no, and go from there.
Okay. And is it for the total fleet?
They have not leased for the total fleet yet. They believe they got 11 vehicles to start off with. These are just the vehicles that are being turned back in right now. There's 7 vehicles have been turned in right now from the sheriff's office.
And Mr. Hale, to answer or to follow up on your question, some of these are probably $500 vehicles. Not all of them, but some of them on this list are in pretty rough shape.
Okay.
Commissioner McRoberts?
Well, we get any calls from the sheriff's department from Enterprise. All of them, I've seen
No, not all of
5 or
them.
6 down there.
They got in 10 or 11, I don't know the number that's come in right now, of the Ford Interceptors, is that what it's called?
Explorers, whatever.
I call it Explorer,
Utility,
yes. SUVs, yes. That was the agreement that was entered into 3 or 4 months ago that the sheriff came and presented, that he was going to do this. Several localities around us have entered into these agreements with the enterprise.
I seen a bunch sitting in the parking lot there.
Yep, that's them.
Any other questions? Hearing none, we'll do. Did I have a motion in a second? I have a motion.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Ball?
Aye.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. With land transfer station DEQ inspection.
Just included in here for your informational purposes. One of you all from the JPSA may want to comment on it. I was still at the Apex Center during the last meeting, but had a good inspection on their latest report. Those guys work hard down there to make certain they don't have any problems there. And then also enclosed is a second item, and that's the audit of the authority as well.
They do do a
Relatively
good
straightforward
job.
audit.
They did a terrific job down there complying with all of DEQ's regulations, and as far as I know, they've never got
I don't think since Lynn's been there, we've had any
any
problems.
problems
as far
with
as
it.
A violation.
Do you want
He's done a good job.
they do a real good job. We need to receive their audit.
If you want just doing a motion to just accept receipt of their audit, we'd get fine.
Okay, entertain a motion to receive the Joint Public Service Authority audit or financial report. Have a second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Accepted. Okay, Mr. Byers, anything other to bring forward the board at this time?
There are no other action items, Mr. Chairman, that I have at this time.
Does any board member have anything to bring forward the board at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I just
Yes.
ask Mr. Barry if he can get with Mr. Farthing and get us an answer on if we can adjust or I guess expand the language on that noise ordinance. Whether we'd have to have a public hearing on it or not.
I will, and it may end up getting the personnel committee back together if need be to go over it. As Mr. Dixon said, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not spending as much time in the court as Mr. Dixon has, but based on what Mr. Farthing has said before, as long as you're not making it more stringent, I don't think you would have to have a second public hearing. So if you're just adding a clarification that you're exempting hunting, Hopefully, we will not have to have another public hearing on this, and that can be added. But got that in my notes here to ask. I will follow
I
up.
mean, I know from this seat, that's what I assumed unnecessary meant, and
Yeah, and, you know, we toss it back and forth on the personnel committee, and Steve, we've talked, you know, to Mike Jones, we've talked to everyone, and none of us wanted to exclude hunting. But it might be a good idea to add it in there. I don't think it will hurt.
Well, I don't think it will hurt either, and I think it will clarify, and I think that's was most of what our public hearing comments were about tonight, was hunting after hours. Okay.
Well, before you close, this is not going to go away. I'm not opposed to adding hunting, but let's put this thing to bed this time, and because we get some social media feedback, let's don't go through this again. We took up an hour over nothing, but I know you got to do it, but at least let's add what they asked for, and if we have a flurry of social media from the wildcat hunters, let's go ahead and vote on this soon.
Okay.
I'd have to disagree with you. I think our job is to represent our citizens, and that's who we heard from tonight.
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else? Mr. Bond?
Sir?
What's our update with DEQ on our parking lot graveling?
I've talked to Jason over at DEQ, and he's instructed me on A, B, and C we have to turn in to be able to ask for a change to the stormwater permit, so I'm working on those numbers. And part of them looking good, one part maybe not. I'll have to ask him maybe a little change. He also advised that some of the changes we've done out there, like the 1 DV at the top of the hill, it didn't enter something in order. He said, when you make your request, go ahead and put the changes in there and we do it. So it's a submittal process, probably $300 for a resubmit fee to the state, send it to them, they'll review it in Abington. So I'm getting close.
How close are we to submitting something to DEQ?
I'm going to talk to him tomorrow about the information I figured out now. I'm going to get some answers from him tomorrow and say, can I move forward with this? And see what they say.
Okay.
It's a shame DEQ spends as much time as they do about putting gravel out there. If they would spend that much time at the feed lot, we might get an answer.
Yeah.
And if you want to pass that on, you can tell them it come from me.
Aye, sir.
I'd advise you not to start that argument.
Maybe.
After they sign the permit.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I hope everybody's had a wonderful week and stuff. I know we're going to start budget here pretty soon. Hopefully it's a quiet rest of the year as far as the Apex Center is up and running. I think it's doing a terrific job. We've had 3, I think, well, I know we had 2, and in my opinion, Saturday night at the rodeo was a sellout. So we've had tremendous response. And believe it or not, the intersection has worked pretty well
The intersection has.
since they put the lights up down there. So
When will we, and I know, Mr. Bear, I asked you this, I can't remember, when will we see the income from the county tax? You told me when.
They remit it monthly. And Bill and I'll make sure we include it in the next package. So you said, we saw a summary of the first couple events that came in the other day. Mr. Cruson provided a spreadsheet to Matthew Miller. I want to say the ticket, the 10% tax that came in off the first 2 weekends of events was somewhere up near $7,000 or $8,000. Does that sound correct?
yes, somewhere around $8,000, I think.
I'd also ask Mr. Bear to contact the treasurer or the commissioner that they notify the vendors that sales in the county, the food tax applies to the county and not be sent in because they have a town address that the town collect that tax. While you're on food taxes, I don't know whether you do anything about it, but I ate in town today, and, I always look to see if somebody's charging food tax. Restaurants in town, on your receipt, say it's a county tax. Can that be fixed? Why would these people that eat in town think that the county is collecting the tax when we're not?
If you'll give me a copy of that receipt and let me know where the business is, we'll certainly just contact them and let them know. I do know there's several restaurants that do break that out now, sales tax and they'll incorrectly call it city tax, but that's just coming from the computer programming.
I think it's something their computer can fix. It's a misconception.
Maybe see, county, county's getting that.
Well, I'd like to have it. That may not be the only one.
Okay, is anything else coming before the board at this time? If not, we are adjourned.